These days, people are making a beeline for beekeeping. Families want hands-on connectivity to their food. With bee populations in decline, farmers need pollinators. Local honey is just as popular as craft beer, since each season lends its distinctively rich flavor. From breeding bees to swarm rescue and crafting local products, a new locavore industry is winging right along.
I worked with the federal government for 10 years. I went to war zones for a living, actually. On a trip back to Austin, I took a beekeeping class, mostly just because I thought it was kind of weird and would make me interesting at dinner parties. And I started a few hives with a friend because it was really fascinating, and I just fell in love and decided to quit my job and that this is what I wanted to do. We own and/or are responsible for caring for about 80 hives.
Both of us had a natural interest in getting some backyard chickens, and maybe our tendency is always just to not be complacent and say, well, what else can we do now?
It's probably an ad for bees in a chicken magazine.
We both loved to camp. Shortly after buying the house, we bought a Vanagon camper that we love to take trips in. So we kind of came up with the nickname Camp Farm for that kind of the love of both being on the road and creating a homestead. It feels a little bit like a campsite, except you usually don't have chickens running around loose at a campsite.
Yeah.
I took a beekeeping class here in Austin, and I did a lot of reading. But the thing with beekeeping, it's really learning by doing. And then we just pulled the plug and bought 10,000 bees and picked them up.
I wanted to keep bees. I just kind of always liked them. You know, I would see bees in a swimming pool or something and save them. We went to a bee meeting to learn about how to keep bees, and some guy there was selling bees, and we just got really excited about it and started saying, you know, we could do this as a business too.
At Sustainable Food Center, we have a mission to cultivate a healthy community by increasing access to healthy, local, fresh food. So the apiary was added last year. It was designed with the help of a UT School of Architecture class under the direction of Steve Ross. The students helped design it and then helped me build it. It's open at the top, and the bees fly out and they help pollinate our garden and the community garden plots. We have seen an increase in production of food in the past year.
They started with packages of bees along with 2 swarms collected from concerned homeowners.
The only thing that we provided them is this 4-sided wooden frame, okay? Everything that you see in the middle, the bees built themselves. So they produce beeswax from their abdomens. They have 8 glands. And this is where not only will they store honey, but the queen will lay her eggs. This is the pupae stage. Behind each of these cells is a little pupae developing into an adult bee. Most of what you see here are females. There are a few males on this frame, so 90 to 100% of a hive at any given point will be females. And you also have males, which are the drones. This is a male here. You see he's a little bit larger.
2 of them are top bar hives and 2 of them are Langstroth hives.
Langstroth hives support vertical frames.
And in a top bar hive, it's horizontal, and the bees start at one end and continue to build comb all the way across the hive.
Tanya and Chuck buy queens or queen cells to start colonies to sell to new beekeepers. They house them in temporary hives called nucleus boxes.
We paint the front door of every box a completely different color and orient it a different direction as well, so that when the queen does fly up and start to memorize her area, that she'll be able to remember which house is hers. So she'll fly out and take these 1, 2, or 3 days of mating flights and eventually come back after she's been mated with anywhere from 7 to 20 drones, male bees. Then she'll come back and she'll start laying for this hive. She continues to make eggs, enough eggs to last her lifetime. She can lay 2,000 to 3,000 in a day, but about 1,000 could be dying in a day. Bees that are leaving and don't return because their wings wear out, or, you know, a bird eats them, a spider catches them, whatever.
When the colony gets large, it creates a new queen and divides into a swarm to find new housing.
Suddenly, they've gone from a hive that may have been 10,000 strong to 30 or 40,000 strong.
He called me one day and said, hey, there's a huge clump of bees on the back fence. And it turned out that half of our hive had split and swarmed and was holding court temporarily in the backyard, and we didn't have the housing here for them. So I had called a friend who's also a local beekeeper who came over and rescued them and caught them in a box, and he's got them now.
When female worker bees leave the hive, abundant nectar nearby is essential for their success to feed the colony.
I think they refer to as optimal forage theory, which we would refer to as biggest bang for the buck. So they're looking at proximity, the amount of sugar in that nectar, and how many flowers are there.
We've had the pollen analyzed from our beehives, and it turns out the bees are collecting pollen from sumac, crepe myrtle, magnolia, and mint primarily, which we don't have on our property. So we know that the bees are foraging and pollinating in the surrounding area. Just to know that our little camp farm here is having an impact in the wider Austin area is really neat.
We can feed bees plain white table sugar. It's not a perfect substitution for nectar. In a pinch, if we've had a tough year, and I'll feed bees rather than have them starve, of course. But when I say, we want plenty of food for our bees, it means we want lots of nectar and pollen producing blooms throughout the year.
Along with food, bees need water, but it's important to give them a safe landing spot.
Bees cannot swim. They can't land on the water like a wasp can and then take off again. They have to either crawl down the sides, and if they're too slippery, they'll fall in. What we've seen in Texas is in the spring, honey tends to be lighter, coming from different plants, and in the fall, it tends to be darker.
People will say, how much honey can a hive produce? And I say, well, they can produce 0 to 100 pounds. It just depends. It's variable. They do that so that they have honey to feed on in the winter, in the early spring, and in the summer.
A good beekeeper is only going to take what they make that's extra. And, because if you have one colony of average size, it probably needs one box of the honey just for itself to last through winter. But if it makes 2 or 3 boxes, there's an extra box for you.
We use what's called a crush and strain method to harvest the honey. So I would say about twice a year, when I notice that there's an abundance of honey in the hives, I'll remove any of the full honey frames, and we physically scrape it off with a spatula and put it through a triple strainer bucket, and then crush the rest of the honey and strain the remainder.
Beekeepers harvest the wax for many products.
I actually use it on bikes. It's like a natural thread lock.
How much space do you need?
I've got a couple hives on city lots downtown Austin that are on 50 by 100 lots. And the city of Austin allows 2 hives and a nucleus colony, so kind of 2.5 hives, 2 and 1 kind of growing.
Bees have headed to flowers for millions of years, but the novice beekeeper needs a little direction.
Anyone can do it, but of course when you first start, even if you read books or taken classes, you don't know a whole lot until you actually see it and do it and get to feel it in your hands.
I started attending the Travis County Beekeepers Association meetings, which they hold monthly, and they have a great mentorship program.
There's a state association, the Texas Beekeepers Association, so there's groups of people out there to help. So it's being really connected and not just trying to learn from one source, I think, is really important.